Have you ever considered turning your love for gardening into a business? If so, join me in welcoming my friend Britney as she shared with us the ins and outs of how she turned her love for growing flowers into what is now Two Sisters Flower Farm. Hi Britney, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Me too. I am very excited about this conversation because at some point in the last couple of years, maybe I thought about the idea of selling my flowers, selling, the beautiful blooms that I have. And I have a very small space here in Indiana. But talking to you, I'm very excited because I have a lot of questions for you. And I know that a lot of people that are watching this video that want to somehow sell their own flowers or, maybe make this a business, this video is going to be so helpful for them. But before we start, tell us a little bit about where you're located, what do you do, how long you have been doing it for the people that don't know you.
Of course. So my name is Britney, and I'm a flower farmer. So I own, along with my sister Emily, she's my younger sister that has cerebral palsy, but together we own Two Sisters Flower Farm. We are a flower farm that's located actually in West Michigan. So we're considered Zone 5B. And we grow and sell specially cut flowers. For us, we have this deep-seated belief that there is something beautiful, blooming in nature every month of the year. And so I feel like our flower farm might be a little unique in that we really have a seasonal focus. We try our best to offer a full year of seasonal offerings. We often say we work with Mother Nature. We do a full spring lineup where we do specialty tulips and daffodils. We transition to the summer where we have more of your traditional cut flowers that we offer for sale. Things like your zinnias and your sunflowers and more of your nostalgic cut flowers. And then we still continue on into the fall. We have an entire fall season. We actually grow 6 acres of heirloom pumpkins, well over 1,000 potted mums, and we have a great time being able to offer that to our community. And then we really round out our year with our holiday market. So it's a full holiday market where we work with actually a local tree farm and do a lot of evergreen products, things like hand-tied wreaths or fun and festive porch pots. And so that's kind of like us in a nutshell. I always say our motto is helping you celebrate the magic of every season. And so that's really been our focus as we've grown our business.
So you really are not just busy during the whole summer months. I mean, when you think about a flower farm, you think, summer blooms, zinnias, dahlias, but you really are all year long with everything that you offer.
Yeah, and that was sort of by accident and sort of intentional as we've grown our business. We here in West Michigan, being a Zone 5B, we have a relatively short growing season. Our last frost typically hits about mid-May, and then our first frost usually hits about mid-October. So it's a good long season, but for us, we didn't have the infrastructure, and we actually, even 5 years in, we still don't have things like a heated greenhouse or high tunnels. So we didn't have any of that season extension that a lot of flower farmers have. And so knowing that, we kind of fell in love with this idea of flowers, we're like, okay, we have to get creative in the way that we offer flowers so that we can extend our season. And so really that's how we said, okay, let's work with Mother Nature, like I've said, and let's do the spring flowers that are really tolerant of cold temperatures, and let's do fall where there's a lot of pumpkins and a lot of fun seasonal products that maybe aren't traditional flowers, but that we can still offer so that we can be in business, I guess, for a longer part of the year.
So, Britney, how do you starting to cut flowers? Do you come from a family of gardeners or farmers? Tell us a little bit. How do you decide cut flowers is where I need to be?
I do come from a line of farmers. My grandparents were farmers. They were vegetable farmers, so not a whole lot of flowers. For me, the flowers it was a creative hobby. I have worked on actually a dairy farm since I was just 10 years old. So I have grown up in agriculture, even though I wasn't necessarily like born directly onto a farm. I kind of found my way into agriculture, and I just fell in love with the idea of always being outside. And so when I found myself needing a hobby, it was just, even though I don't have a green thumb whatsoever, I mean, you would laugh if you knew how many plants I have killed in my lifetime. But it was a hobby that I could it was challenging and I could be outside, and that was just the big draw for me. And so that's how I really went from working on a dairy farm to growing flowers.
Perfect. How much space do you have for your cut flowers? You mentioned you have 5 acres. Is that just for your pumpkins, or is that overall for everything that you grow?
So believe it or not, we grow on a really small plot for our cut flowers, what you would consider your traditional cut flower mixed bouquets. We only grow about 1/4 acre, and that includes everything from our hardy annuals, those early spring flowers. We grow on that 1/4 acre all of our tender annuals. So our you-pick flower garden happens on that 1/4 acre lot, and then all of our dahlias as well. So the flowers are really just 1/4 acre of land. And yes, we do grow that 5 or 6 acres of pumpkins, which is separate from the flowers. But if you're looking at just the flowers, we grow in a very small space.
Oh, wow, that is very small. I was thinking, from looking at your beautiful videos and pictures, I was thinking that you had, like a few acres, but that's not a lot of space for starting a business, right? For starting your own flower business.
Exactly. You don't need a lot. And I think everyone thinks that they want to grow flowers and they feel so limited by their space. And I'm like, if you just use what you have, I mean, this year we have decided to grow specialty tulips. And we're actually, because I don't have more space, we're growing them in traditional bulb crates. So they're just like a 10 by 20 bulb crate. And we're growing them using my cold garage and the ambient temperature of my farmhouse basement. And in a small footprint, we're growing 8,000 tulips, which is plenty for our small farm, but something that I never thought possible, because I always thought you'd have to have such a huge operation, and you really don't.
How long have you been growing flowers before you started to decide, I want to go into the business of a flower farm? Do you have years of experience, like you say, years of killing flowers or trying new things? How much time do you have for that?
I started growing flowers as a hobby in 2019, and it was a very unsuccessful year, but by 2020, I'm like, we're taking the leap and I'm gonna turn this into a business. I mean, now let me say, I did maintain my full-time job as we were taking that transition, wanting to turn our hobby into a business. So it wasn't like I quit my job and we're just gonna flower farm, but it was 2019 a hobby. 2020, I'm like, let's focus on creating a business for ourselves. And then by 2022, I was able to make that my full-time income and then step away from doing a full-time job on the side.
That is a very short time for you to leave your full-time job and just go full into into flowers. So you have the knowledge, you have a little bit of knowledge, you have the space, the small space, the 1/4 acre for growing your flowers. So you decide to go into business. Were the first couple of years what you thought that were going to be? Do you have success in growing the flowers and selling the flowers? Share a little bit with us about that.
Business was definitely nothing that I expected. I don't know why I thought it would be such a linear progression or it would be super easy. It's not. It never has been. Even 2023, it's still hard. But I think that I've just learned to stick with it. Like, I am so analytically minded and I love a good puzzle. And so give me problems to solve, like we solve every day on our flower farm. And I'm like, okay, this is a challenge that I can work with. And the fact that we're growing beautiful flowers, I mean, that's just an added bonus. So we definitely still experience plenty of growing pains, but it's just something we've learned. You get more comfortable, I guess, being uncomfortable the longer that you do it. And that's really what we've tried to embrace as we've grown.
You get more comfortable being uncomfortable. I love that. I think that I might title this video that, because that's a perfect way to express how one feels in the garden. So where have you learned everything that involves growing the flowers or harvesting the flowers? Did you take a class? Did you take a course somewhere?
I will say I think the best teacher is trial and error. So we just I'm willing to fail at a lot of things, and we try a lot of different things, and some of those things our community never sees because it was such a total flop. But I've learned the hard way of how to do that. But I also believe that you can reduce the amount of time that it takes to learn something by learning from someone that's already done what you want to do. So I've invested heavily in workshops. I've taken the Floret workshop, and I've learned so much from that. It's a popular flower growing course. Every year I'm taking more and more workshops because there's so much value when I invest in myself. And it's scary because if you really do the numbers, I'm sure I've invested tens of thousands of dollars in myself, but that's the greatest payoff in business. You can't fail when you're always investing in yourself. I mean, last year we signed up for the Tulip Workshop, which is presented by a number of talented growers that taught us how to grow our tulips like we're growing them now. And so, I mean, we could do it on our own and trial and error our way through it, but it's just reduced the time that we've actually gotten successful. So I will encourage anyone to invest in programs to help you get to where you want to go faster.
I love that. I love that you take the time, and you say you take the money and the time to invest in educating yourself so that you can get that back from the garden, from the years. If you will have to choose one, what would your favorite season in the garden be for selling the flowers?
Oh, it's so hard. It's like asking me to pick a favorite child or something. That is so hard to do. I think it's so funny because with every season, no matter how many times we repeat these seasons, every time we get to summer, I'm like, oh, it's a rush of fresh air, because even though we've done this season, we're transitioning from spring. And so I just like the transitions because it's something new. That's, I think, why I love being a seasonal farm, is because every couple of months we're doing something new. I'm never getting tired of growing flowers because it's constantly changing. I love every August once the dahlias start to bloom because I haven't seen them for a full year. So I sometimes think that we need to go without them for a little bit. So I like that we're cycling our year, because in their absence, I'm loving something new. But then once those dahlias cycle back in August, I'm like, oh, I've missed you guys. I love you. And, so I think they're all my favorite. I know that's probably not the answer that you want, but it's the truth.
I agree. There is something about the first flowers that bloom in the spring to the last flower that blooms in the fall. I completely agree with you. How do you decide, as a flower farmer, how do you decide what flower makes the cut for growing the next year?
As a flower farmer, it has to come down to business. In the beginning, we grew a lot of flowers that we wanted to grow because it was our garden and we were just trying it. But as we gained experience and as we focus on growing a business, we have to always have that in the back of our mind. What flowers do customers want? What flowers can we sell? Because it's one thing if we can grow a field of sunflowers, but if no one wants to buy them, we don't have a profitable business. We just have a field of sunflowers. We're just constantly looking at what do our customers like? What can we produce efficiently so that we can actually make a profit from it? So we're very analytical when we decide on what we're going to grow. As much as I would love to just say, oh, that's beautiful, we're going to grow that, there's a little bit more that has to go into it for it to make the cut for us.
Do you have a flower that you thought at the beginning, before growing it, that it wasn't going to do so well as far as selling, that it surprised you at the end, that your customers wanted the most compared to others? There's
been a few flowers, and I think it comes down to when I grow flowers, I think people are going to want the fanciest flowers available. And what surprised me is how well, even in the summer months, that we sell zinnias and sunflowers, two very traditional flowers, but there's such a demand and market for them that I can't overlook growing them. They might not be the most exciting in the seed catalog, and I do love those flowers, don't get me wrong, but I was surprised sometimes at the simplicity that our customers enjoy, because I sometimes think that I like to overcomplicate it, and that's probably a mistake in business. But if I just focus on what they want, then yeah, it just makes sense. Grow more sunflowers and zinnias.
as a home gardener, I think that it would be hard for me to do that in a business perspective because I grow the flowers that I want to look at during the year. But do you find yourself having a flower that you didn't necessarily love? I guess let me rephrase that. Do you have a flower that is your least favorite to grow in your flower farm?
Do I have a flower that's not my favorite? I suppose, and it might not be for the reason that you're thinking. There are some flowers that I have this love-hate relationship with, only because of maybe they present difficulties that make business harder. So let me give you a few examples. I have a love-hate relationship with like the pincushion flower, Scabiosa. It's beautiful in the garden. It comes in some really fun colors. If you've ever seen like the sangria or the dark night pincushion flowers, they're just a strong pop of color. But they grow on very wiry stems and they are pain to harvest. And so it's flowers like that where I'm always like looking at the trade-off is like, is it worth the hassle? But our customers love it. And so it's trade-offs like that I'm looking at. I don't necessarily hate flowers or dislike flowers for their looks, but there's sometimes those trade-offs where I'm thinking, is the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? Another flower for us is marigolds. Our customers, they really enjoy marigolds. They're a strong pop of color. They look very vibrant in bouquets. And personally, I don't like the smell of marigolds. It has a very strong smell for some people that can be off-putting.
Yeah.
And so it's always one of those things. I'm like, do I love it enough to grow it because my customers love it, or am I going to, shy away from growing it?
Yeah. I have to say, I personally love marigolds. They have a personal feeling for me. Their smell, it reminds me of a very, very big holiday in my country, in Mexico, Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, marigolds everywhere. And having that smell, that fragrance in my garden, it just reminds me of home. Do you have a flower in your garden that you have a personal attachment to for whatever reason?
Oh, this is a good question. I got to think about it for a second. I strongly connect to flowers based off of smell. And so there are certain flowers that I grew my first year of growing flowers strictly because they were something that attracted me to them. So carnations, especially the heirloom varieties, they have such a delicate scent to them that I can still smell that even now that we don't grow carnations right now. And sweet peas are something as well that we don't grow them on a large scale because it's a difficult crop to grow in our climate. But again, even now sitting here, I can remember that smell, and it triggers such an emotional connection and a memory that I can understand why people have that strong attachment to flowers. And so I'm always like just looking to recreate that for other people. So yeah, I still, just from just a couple of years ago, I still have that connection to some of these flowers, and it is so unique and so special, and I love that.
Do you grow everything from seed in your flower farm, or do you purchase plugs from companies to help you start other things?
I love that question, only because when I first started growing flowers, my very first year, I thought it was cheating if I didn't grow everything in my garden from seed. I thought the most successful flower farmers could grow anything and everything, and so I refused to buy plugs. And the longer that I'm in business, I've realized that I cannot physically do everything myself, and being able to delegate certain tasks like buying plugs from someone who can efficiently do that, it alleviates some of the time and labor that I have involved in growing flowers, so I can spend that time, elsewhere. So the large majority of our flowers are grown from seed, but I do order in things like Lizzianthus, which just takes such a long time to grow from seed. So I order those in as plugs. Some of these spring crops, I will order in as crops just so that as I'm harvesting our tulips, I'm not spending time having to seed our crops. And again, we overwinter a number of cool hardy annuals. So we'll plant them in September and they'll overwinter and bloom for us in the spring. But September is a hard time for me to have seeds ready to go because we're trying to transition to our fall farm stand. So there's a number of those flowers as well that I just order in as plugs so that it can free up my time to spend elsewhere.
You mentioned overwintering, and this brings me to my next question, because being a flower farmer in West Michigan, what are some of the challenges that are unique to you, and how are you going around those?
My biggest challenge was the fact that when I first started growing flowers, that I was often comparing what I was doing with other flower farmers that grow in a warmer climate than me. So when I first fell in love with this idea of growing flowers, I was following flower farmers that were growing in zones, 7 or 8, and that had a much longer growing season than I did. And I really felt limited by that because I thought I'm never going to have a growing season like them because I don't have that season extension. I don't have what they have. And once I realized, well, I might not have what they have, but I have something pretty unique here in Zone 5B where I have plenty of flowers that are tolerant of the cold. When I learned to work with what I had and I kind of put on my blinders and was like, okay, we're just gonna make the most of it. Like that's when I really kind of just was like, I'm gonna flower farm like me, not like anyone else. And so that was the biggest challenge is you're trying to, notice the trends that are happening, but you have to really farm in a way that makes sense for your circumstances. And so paying attention to that was probably one of our biggest learning lessons that we have had to overcome, and it's probably been our most rewarding lesson for us.
I love that you mentioned comparing yourself with other gardeners that have completely different zones or weather. I would think that the weather in Michigan is probably your biggest, right, for overwintering or for trying to keep on the flowers that you grow year after year.
It isn't in some extent, but there's a lot of flowers like snapdragons that are actually hardy into zone 3, which is much more north than I am here, even in zone 5B. There's flowers like we grow Sweet William, Feverfew, Rudbeckia. There's plenty of flowers that enjoy the growing conditions that we have, and just paying attention to those flowers, we're able to grow without having the additional expense of added cover. I mean, we plant them in the fall, they grow some roots for a couple of weeks, and they're so tolerant of cold that even though we get snowfall in the winter, they can survive just fine uncovered. And so really paying attention to, again, not growing necessarily what I want to grow, but again, focusing more on what thrives in my environment. Like that's been huge for us.
Do you also plant shrubs for cut flowers? I have a row of hydrangeas that are just bloom beautifully during the season. Do you do a lot of those in your property? I know that you only mentioned 1/4 of an acre, but do you have other spaces where you use plant shrubs for that?
We don't right now. Our biggest, even because we're so early on in our business, I feel like we're still finding our way and learning what we like and what we don't like. And so I've really shied away with doing anything like permanent beds or perennials other than maybe daffodils, because I'm really just still finding our way of how we like to farm. And so I really don't like to pigeonhole us into a certain way of farming until I really have a clear understanding of what this flower farm idea is going to look like for us in the long term. I mean, I would love to have a field of peonies or some other kind of perennials that I could cut from, but at this point, we're still just learning what we like.
Perfect. Britney, how are you selling your flowers? Are you having a stand at the farmer's market? Do you have monthly subscriptions, or do you deliver to customers? How does that work for you?
We started primarily selling just through a farm stand because I didn't want the commitment of I was still learning how these flowers, how long it would take to harvest and create bouquets. And so I wanted something that was very low pressure. I could fill the farm stand when I had the time, but I wasn't committing to having a product, available every week at the farmer's market. I wasn't committing to more than I felt comfortable with. As the business has grown and I felt more comfortable growing flowers, we certainly have expanded to offer subscriptions. And sometimes that means that customers pick up their weekly bouquets from us, and other times that means that we deliver to them. We also like to sell an experience. So we do You Pick Flower events where we invite people into our garden because it's another sales avenue where we can sell our flowers, but maybe reduce our labor costs a little bit because we're not picking those flowers ourselves.
The You Pick garden that you have and that you actually posted a few videos on your YouTube channel was how I found you. And for those people who are watching, if you are interested in just knowing how to grow flowers and looking at beautiful landscapes, you gotta check Britney's channel because you post amazing content, and most of the time just blown away because we have somewhat similar zones in Zone 5 here in central Indiana, so we have about the same growing time. And I was just watching your video about growing ranunculus in crates, and I thought, that's genius. I could just do that in containers. So if you're not following Britney, you definitely should. What do you do with the flowers that don't get sold? What do you do if you have, a few hundred flowers of, I don't know, dahlias? What do you do with the flowers that you don't get to sell?
For starters, I don't stress over it because I think often people are like, oh, I want to sell my flowers, but what if no one buys them? Well, that's not I take it as a learning lesson. Maybe I've grown more than I have a customer base for. So I take that lesson and I'm like, okay, well, how can I expand so that I can reach more customers? If I have leftover flowers, maybe that means that I'll give some away to friends or other people in the community that maybe wouldn't buy my flowers, but maybe if they just experience my flowers once, they might be convinced to buy in the future. I mean, just because I'm not making a sale from maybe a bouquet that I have doesn't mean that I'm not setting that relationship up for a future sale. So I never look at it as a failure if I have leftover flowers. There's certainly things that you can do to promote sales in the future and to really grow your business, even if at the time you might not be bringing in revenue.
Now that you have been in business for a few years, is there something that you are doing year after year to save you money when you grow flowers the following year? I know that you are overwintering a few of them, but do you do anything else as far as supplies to help you with money saving?
Oh, of course. We are always looking for things that we can do to reuse what we have, or we like to operate very leanly as possible. I mean, we don't like to have a lot of waste. We might invest in one year in cell trays that are maybe a little bit higher quality, knowing that they're going to be a higher initial investment, but they're going to last us for several more years than a more inexpensive tray. So we're definitely looking at quality over quantity. We're thinking long term, and we're also just simplifying and trying to become more efficient with our practices. Like, how can we plant this field next year so that we save money? I mean, there's definitely ways as we become more well-versed in growing that we can cut expenses so that we're able to, enjoy those higher profit levels if possible.
So what are you doing during the month of February or March? How does that look like for you preparing for the season or growing the flowers, finishing, touching the flowers that you're going to grow?
So the beginning of our year for us, especially right now in February, is a lot of planning. We're making sure that we have all of our seasons lined up because I've learned that as, Christmas, even our holiday market, it might feel like ages away, but once we really get into the busyness of our season, we don't have the time to really plan out what's next. And so I'm always like, how can I plan out the bulk of our year right now so that we can efficiently execute on those seasons as they come? I feel like if I don't plan properly, I feel like I'm always playing catch up once that season happens. It's like I'm never well enough prepared for it. So that's what we're doing right now. We're also, as we're learning more about tulips, our tulip season actually began 2 weeks ago. So right now we're deep harvesting tulips, and we're also just learning. We're learning new skills that we can apply in the years to come so that we can be even more efficient at what we're doing as a flower farm.
do you find yourself being easily influenced by the beautiful pictures that you find on social media and deciding to make a seed order on that? Or do you just go, no, this is what I'm going to order this year and this is it? Because being a home gardener, I mean, throughout the year, I find a flower that I like and I'm ordering seeds. And come, the beginning of the year when it's time to start those seeds, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need more space because I have so many seeds.
I completely understand that. And I was more heavily influenced early on. I feel like I am much more business oriented right now, and I'm more connected to my vision of what I want this flower farm to be. My vision is that this is a profitable flower farm that allows me to create a life that I love and to live my life like I like. And so I'm very much connected to that vision. And so I'm not necessarily influenced by those extra purchases, because in my mind, they can sometimes go against that greater vision I'm doing, to trust my gut and my intuition, and then just be focused on what the overarching goal is.
For the people that are watching this video and they know how to grow flowers, they have an idea when to harvest, what to do to save money growing those flowers in their homes, and maybe they want to do this for a business, however that looks like, what will be the advice that you give them as far as starting a flower farm business?
My best advice for anyone that wants to take this leap of going from hobby flower grower to a full-time flower farmer is just to take the leap and get started. Like, you're never going to have it all figured out. And I know we like to have that reassurance or that confidence that it's going to work out. And you're never guaranteed that. But I feel like if you just get started, you find the motivation, you find the knowledge to take that next step and to just keep going. And it's so funny because had I planned out my entire 5-year plan of what I thought flower farming was back in the day, it would be so different than what the reality of my flower farming journey is now. It never goes as easily as you think. And I think that's the beauty of it. When you have no expectations or maybe very low expectations, you're more willing to kind of bend and flex with the opportunities that come before you. And I think that's something great to be able to do in business. So, just take that first step and then figure it out as you go.
Britney, where can people find you in your beautiful flower business?
So we are on social media. We're Two Sisters Flower Farm, and you can find us both on Instagram and Facebook. We also enjoy sharing a lot of behind the scenes on YouTube. Again, we're Two Sisters Flower Farm. And then we do have growing content on our blog, which is twosistersflowerfarm.com. So we try and be a little bit of everywhere. But yeah, social media is our primary, again, and our website has more information.
And YouTube was how I found her. And my goodness, even if you are not thinking about starting your own business when it comes to flowers, the amount of information and the knowledge that Britney shares on her YouTube channel is it's priceless. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Britney, thank you so much for spending a little bit of your morning with us. I thank you for taking my invitation. As I mentioned before, I watched some of your videos and I feel like I know you, but I don't, we don't really know each other. So I am really, really thankful that you decided to spend some time with me today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I mean, it is so much fun connecting and talking to other growers. So I really appreciate it.